Ahoy friends, welcome to building the Alpha Dory. I'm Dan and this is a project to build a William Chamberlain Beachcomber Alpha Dory from John Gardner's The Dory book. Illustrations by Sam Manning. Today we're hoping to get the number 2 strakes cut to shape and possibly cut the gains on the bench. We'll see how far we get in this video. Alright, let's get out there. Okay, so I guess this video will get a little bit into the shape of the planking on the Alpha Dory, which is what I'm figuring out right now. So, like I said, I built this boat 12 years ago, about that. Built it from John Gardner's lines, of course, and so as I was noticing as I was planking it, the planking lines that he's drawn on the plans where he lined off each plank, it's a little bit different than some of the old photos that he actually includes in the book. Now, I've no doubt he got the lines off of a Alpha Dory, but that doesn't change that there's definite differences in the lining off of the planking in some of those old photos. So when I was building that boat 12 years ago, I kind of tried to follow get as close to the photos as I could, and as I was kind of in the process and doing it, I started realizing something about the planking. Now, I didn't actually do this in that previous boat, but I came very close to it, and what it was is that the top edge, that one of the edges of almost every plank was straight. There's a number of reasons that old-time builders may have done that. If actual boards were coming from the mill with straight edges, the board is thicknessed and the edges removed, so it's they're not getting flitches from the mill. If they were getting boards, then there'd be a straight edge to start with to lay your pattern on for each plank. The other thing is if you are getting flitches from the mill with two rough edges, on either side of the log, then if you have a wide enough flitch and split that down the middle, and you split it with a straight line, then you can use that straight line on one edge of either plank that you cut out of that board. So it would seem to be one of the most efficient uses of wood. The other thing is if you have a board that's the same width down its length, approximately, say you've got a board that's 18 inches wide in the heartwood, because you're trying to cut out sapwood. So you got a board that's 18 inches wide. So if you split that down the center, or say it's even, say it's less, say it's 16 inches wide. If you split it down the center, you'll get 2 8-inch boards. But you can see that these boards have a fair amount of, the planking on the boat is flared in the middle. which is kind of the opposite as to what the garboard does. The garboard flares at the ends, but that's kind of another story. So anyway, if you split that board down the center, you get two 8-inch boards. But if you split that board at an angle, at a slight angle, you'll get two boards, the one end of which is, say, 10 or 12 inches wide, and the other end of which is, say, like 3 or 4 inches wide, just like these boards here. And then you can cut out the sapwood, and you'll have a board that's 9 to 10 inches wide, creeping up on 11, which is more than enough for each one of the planks, except for the garboard, which has gone into the alpha build so far. So anyway, so that's what I was noticing on the previous boat that I built. So this boat, I've sort of made a deliberate effort to keep the edge of each plank, one edge, straight. And you'll remember that's what we did with this, with the number 1 strakes and the top edge of the garboard. Top edge of the number 1 strake, they're both straight lines bent to the curve of the boat. And that's what gives it its shape. There's no shape cut into the plank. Now the bottom edge of the number 1 strake has a little bit of curve because of this gap right here. So the top edge of this is straight. Top edge of this is straight. But the fact that this board is at a different angle than this board, even though the frame is straight, because there's this board is kicked out by the thickness of this board. So that results in a small amount of curvature cut into the bottom edge of this number 1 strake. And I think you saw that when I was getting the boards out. There was maybe 2 inches of curvature over the 21-foot length of the plank. Okay, so now what I've got out here is the number 2 strakes. So it's the third plank up on the boat. Number 2 strakes with a straight edge. Now these strakes, when they go on, they will also be overlapping a board, just like this board is. So since the number 2 strakes are overlapping a board, just like the number 1 strakes are overlapping a board, this board and the next board up will be at the same angle because the frame is straight right up to here, right? So what that means is now I can use the straight edge that I've cut on this number 2 strake. I can use that straight edge to meet up with the top edge, which is also a straight edge of the number 1 strake, because it's going to be following the same line. It's the same board at the same angle, and they're both straight, so they should lay on top of each other. And they're going to come very, very close. All right, so then the question is, all right, so then there's got to be curve cut into this next strake, this number 2 strake. Because you can see how narrow the boat is in the middle, and you can see how much room I've actually got till I run out of wood on the stem. So what I need to do is these boards up here, if they're going to fit on the stem, need to be very narrow. Right? That's the only way they'll fit on this stem. If they're the same width all along, then when I get up to the stem, I'm going to have a bow that's like up here, because you're adding 9 or 10 inches, which is the width I need to make up on these frames. I need 9 or 10 inches per board. So I'd have 3 more boards up here. It would look like a Viking ship. The bow would be swept up so high. So the way Alpha Dory builders deal with that is, they've got these boards that are tapered at the ends, stem and stern. All right, so what we need to do to get the shape of this next strake, number 2 strake, is to figure out how much room approximately we want to make up on these frames until the turn of the until the chine, the second chine, the turn of the frame, where there's those knuckles, those frame knuckles. So, it's pretty simple here. Just put a ruler on and I set it in 1.25 inches for the overlap, which I'm going to have on every board. And then about here, so we're at 9 inches. Where my thumb is, 9 inches. And then the next board will go on something like that. And the next board will go on something like that. So we'll have 2 more strikes, each at about 9 inches. You can see there's that 1.25 inch overlap too. Maybe more once we get into the angles. But so this right here is about where I want to be. When the boards land. All right. So now I know what I want for a width at the bow, which is like maybe 2 or 3 inches. Plank width, about 3 inches there. And I want a little bit more at the stern. I'm going to want maybe 4 inches back at the stern, but not a lot more, because the garboard is a little bit lower at the stern. So I'm going to want about that width there, and then I want a plank that's about 9 inches wide once it gets to amidships. So now I'll show you how we do that. How I do that, I guess. Alright, so this is the plank. I put a tape measure on the boat and measured the top edge of the plank below it that we're going to be where this plank is going to go. And so that length, the length of the plank is right around 21 feet. So first thing I'll do is I'll get the length of the plank that I'm going to end up with. Alright, and I've also got a knot down here that I'm trying to cut out, so I may actually shift the length of the plank down this end a bit. So 21 feet. We'll see how this works. Alright, so those lengths are kind of guidelines. They're not, I'll find out the length of the plank in actuality when I put it on the boat. But these are kind of guidelines as to where I want to fit my plank in between. So, next thing, I know I want about 4 inches, maybe 3.5, wide at the transom. This is going to be my transom end of the plank. And I know I want about 2.5 to 3 inches at the bow. Alright, and I've got both of those lengths. The plank was about 4.5 inches at the bow, and it's about and it's 4.5 inches here as well. So I had plenty of wood for my plank, and I'm going to be able to cut out some of this knot as well by going a little bit narrower back here. So next thing is to clamp this. This is a 19-foot batten, which isn't going to be quite long enough to do the whole plank, but you know, I'll be able to shimmy it down, get the rest of it. Clamp the batten at one end, alright? And now amidships. Which is going to be about 11 feet. 10.5 feet. This is where I want that plank that's, we decided 9 inches wide. Alright. Let me just go measure it one more time to be sure I want 9 inches. Yeah, that's about it. Just about perfect. So, I'll mark that at 9 inches. And then bring the batten out to 9 inches. Sort of wiggle it on the board to get it so it's laying smooth, laying fair. Clamp it somewhat lightly at 9 inches. And then I can actually snag my straight edge to kind of show me where to put the end of the batten on that last, on the last width mark that I made, which is right at the stem, and that'll show me where to taper the batten in. And that last 2 or 3 feet up to the stem doesn't have or should not have a lot of curve anyway, so this will work fine for that. Alright, so that looks like a pretty good line. It's drawn by the batten, so it's going to be a nice fair line, a fair curve, which will make it similar to the straight lines that the straight plank top edges, the straight lines that we've already put on the boat. It's just that this one isn't straight, it's a batten faired curve. Okay, so there's the line that we just drew. And here's where we're approximating that the board will end. Here's where we know it's going to be finished, and you can see the line runs right along there. So the next thing to do is cut to that line. I'm going to extend that batten line to the end of the board here, just so I'll know where to start the circular saw, so that when I come to the line I'm not trying to twist the saw all out of shape. Actually start down this end here. This wood here is the scrap from this plank, right? Because when we cut this plank, we cut it diagonally down the center, and we spun it around and scarfed it in the middle, so we had tapers anyway. So this is the amount of wood that doesn't get used from that entire plank. So you can see it's a fairly efficient use of the material that you got. Put as much of it into the boat as you can, and as little on the floor of the shop, I guess. Anyway. Okay, and yeah, so here's the second plank, the other side, second strake, and all I did to get this is trace the first plank that we just batten faired and cut, and what I did was I set that first plank on the boat just to make sure it fits, and then traced it to the other plank and cut this other plank out. So we're good to go. We've got the two strakes, you know, the one strake for either side, cut to shape and ready to put on the bench and start cleaning it up. So we will get to bevel cutting today, or at least we'll get to clean the edges up. Alright, so that was the rough cut of the curvature of the top edge of the plank. Like we said, the bottom edge of the plank, this plank, number 2 strake, number 2 plank, third plank on the boat. Bottom edge of it is going to be straight, so what I'm going to do is clean up that mill rough cut edge now. And I can straighten it out a little bit more as I clean it up. It's going to take a little bit more on the center of the boat, on the ends of the plank and in the middle to clean it up. There's an army truck down the street. And like I was saying before, I've got this little jig set up so that I can do this on the planking bench. I've got the clamp on the bench. This shop is a little bit too short to build a 21-foot dory, so you know, I'm running this plank right past the edge of the bench, which would be plenty long for most dories. You know, most dories are like, say, 16 to 18 feet, so the most you'll need is around a 20-foot plank. This pine plane's really easy. So, just looking down the plank for any high spots. A nice long jointing plane. I think does the trick. Does the trick for long flat surfaces anyway. It's not much use. Not much use in most situations, but this is what it's made for, so definitely got to use it. Yeah, this this pine planes incredibly easily. Now, so all this work of getting the shape and cutting the shape into these planks, you guys may be watching other boat building channels as well. I'm thinking of Acorn to Arabella and Samson Boat Co. especially. And they are cutting shape into their planks, that's for sure. But, nowhere as near as much as this. And they're also not too worried about the actual shape of the curve on the boat. They're kind of cutting planks into shape in order to either fit more planks in or to take up more space on the boat. So like maybe they're tapering their planks at the bow and leaving them wider in the middle. So that's why they're cutting their shape. They're not cutting the shape typically so that the plank will lay in a certain way on the boat. Now that's what we're doing here. We're cutting the shape so that it'll lay in a certain way on the boat. Now why is that? And it's because of the building material and the method of construction. Both Samson Boat Co. and Acorn to Arabella are building, well, first of all, much bigger boats, but they're building with Carvel style planking, which is not lapped strakes. And they're also building with much narrower boards per the thickness of the board. So these boards are wider than most of the boards on Acorn to Arabella and Samson Boat Co. Like, this garboard here is 15 inches wide. Now some of the boards, like the garboard on Samson Boat Co. might be 15 inches, but these boards are also only half an inch thick, or 5/8 thick. So they're much thinner. So the ratio, the scaled shape of these boards is far different than what those guys are building with. And those guys are edge setting their boards. So like I was saying, the boards may be wider and narrower in order to take up more room on the hull or take up less room, but they're not really having to cut the shape of the hull into the boards because they can edge set the boards. And what that means is they put the board on the hull and then pull the board down against the previous board. So they're flexing and bending their boards to a fairly large degree, almost like you would build and flex boards in a strip plank hull. Now it's not to that degree because they do have dimensionality to their boards. They're not just laying on strips. You can get even more flex out of a strip, but that's what edge setting is. It's bending the board like you'd flex a strip plank down onto the strip plank that was on before it. That's what these guys are doing. Now in a dory construction, these boards are too wide and they're too thin, and also they're pine, which is more brittle, so it won't edge set like oak does. And I'm not sure what Samson Boat Co. is using, but apparently it edge sets okay. But anyway, a pine board of the dimensions that we're using here will not edge set. When you try to edge set it, it'll buckle. So if I try and pull down here, it'll bow out on the bottom edge in the middle there. It'll flex out and it'll want to twist as well. So when we're cutting the boards to go on this boat, we have to cut them to the shape of the boat, because we're not going to be able to edge set them once we're installing them. We're not going to be able to attach the middle and then flex the stem and stern so it meets and just bend the board, because the board won't bend. It'll twist or pop out or possibly break. So anyway, that maybe explains why there's so much sort of import on the shape of each one of these planks. Alright, well, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. Got any questions or comments, you can leave them in the section below and I'll try to respond. And yeah, have a good day and God bless. See you next video.